Yes.
Hey, I was like, I know, I'm like, I'm waiting for Donnell.
Yeah. Good
I ain't gonna
morning. Good
touch shit
morning.
until So how are you?
Oh man, I'm not okay. I'm not gonna lie
I'm
to you. I'm not okay. And I feel like there's a lot of challenges in like being in spaces where you have to like where people aren't aware of what's going on or
yeah.
are turning a blind eye to it.
And this is, and I'm actually, I'm really sorry to hear, I really am sorry to hear that, but also like, I'm not surprised. It's why I had to leave higher ed, honestly. Like
Mm.
the way that the performance of the statements, right? They don't really say anything. The statements never really say anything, right?
They
It's a
don't.
bunch of fluff. It's like Obama's kind of second iteration of what he kept saying with nothing, right? But it was saying a lot. And while at the same time, we're supposed to be able to continue to just keep going and act as if our personal experiences don't matter.
It's been heavy. It's been really emotional. It's been a lot of big feelings, um, and a lot of paradigm shifts, like in a short time, like so quickly. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, we're going to get more into that. But how are you? How are you doing?
I'm here. I'm not gonna lie. I'm here, right? It's been up and down as well. And I think the up and down is that it's not only appalling to see what's happening and also like you really get hit with your own humanity, but for me it's nonstop, right? It's been a nonstop conversation. It's been a nonstop act of genocide and dehumanization for so long. And like been my whole career. Like I've had to, because I study empire and the state, I've had to study genocide my whole career, right? From looking at the bones to having to talk to survivors to having to like read it. There's things that I've read that I can't get out of my head, right? When I read about the partition of India and Pakistan, like I can't get that out of my head, right? Because you read these things, and you kind of see the brutality of it. So I think now there's a I have a fatigue, but it's not this ridiculous boycott fatigue. I have a fatigue of violence. Like I'm just sick of it at this point,
Yeah,
right? I'm
yeah.
sick of having to feel like we have to justify the killing of other people as a way to justify our own dehumanization here, right? So when you can justify what's going on there, especially as a black person, as a queer person, as somebody at the margins, disabled, whatever it is, you are trying to justify your own subjugation here because you think it's better, whether you know it or not. And I think that's where I'm getting fatigued because it reminds me of 2020 so much. Like 2020 is really heavy on my heart because it reminds me of that moment again when we saw the global protests, right? Global protests against this stuff. And then we got hit with with more police violence, right? You know what I mean? Like, and we're supposed to just kind of take it. So I think for me, I'm tired, but it's more of a violence tired. So I'm also very fired up at the same time, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Um, and just to, I think what has been the shift that has been happening for me is that I came to a realization. Like, obviously, I grew up in the church. People who follow me know my story. That I been in the church since I was a small child, multiple times a week, 3 to 4 times a week, and conservative, black church, holiness, purity culture, the
Yeah.
whole nine. And so the indoctrination around those types of teachings were very heavy, and we talk about being sold out in the church. My heart is fixed. My mind is made up. My mind is made up was the song we used to sing. And you can't make me doubt him. All these types of like stances that are like, we're unmovable, we're unchanging. This is what we believe. And of course, deconstruction. Then from doing that from 5 or 6 years old to early 20s, mid to early 20s, early to mid 20s. I think that was a difficult process. That process of like pulling out of that indoctrination and like was one of the hardest things in my life. Um, but I feel like what this moment has made me realize is that my indoctrination around, um, oh, it made me realize that also Christianity pacified me in so many ways. I
Yes.
know what I would be doing if I was still in the church that I grew up in. And
Yeah.
it's no, just sharing the truth. Like, I know what I would be doing. I would be praying. I would be fasting. I would be, probably praying for Israel. I would be really swept up in the Christian Zionist narrative that I've been kind of fed my whole life without even realizing it. Like I grew up with pastors who talked about going to the Holy Land and making that that was a big part of our tradition. And I even had a pastor told me that he doesn't think anyone should be a pastor until they've made a trip to the Holy Land to, see for themselves, the ground where Jesus walked on and all these types of things.
Yes.
And so from there on, and my grandfather being a huge supporter and fan of John Hagee, who was the Christians United for Christ or Christians United for Israel, um, pretty much the biggest evangelical voice around Christian Zionism in America. Like my grandfather really loved his ministry and supported him, and he's an immigrant from Jamaica, and but that was my upbringing. So I think I realized that how much the Christianity that I was taught at least would have pacified me in this moment and rendered me silent. And I know that's true for so many people who are still in a lot of those spaces.
Yes. And let's talk about this though, because this is actually really important right now. We have to understand something that we're in the middle of a spiritual warfare. It's been going on for 500 years, right? And this is part of the spiritual warfare. And when I say that, I don't want people to think, and I've talked about this before, but I don't want you to put this in this kind of fantastical Harry Potter crap, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ways that in order to subjugate another spirit, right? Another body, another living being, you have to make them docile in one way, shape, or form. You have to buy into their subjugation some way, somehow. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take a minute because the thing is that the spirit of life, y'all, is not meant to be confined. We're not meant to be bounded. We're not meant to be somehow shaped and then that's the only thing we are. And we're just going to keep steady. The only thing in life that is constant is change. Right? That is the only thing that we can rely upon is change, which also we call chaos because we're not taught how to engage with change. Like you just said, you have to be unmovable, unchanging, right? You believe what you believe and that's it. Mm-hmm. That's a form of literally domestication, right? If we want to think about domestication of the land, domestication of resources, domestication of the people, which is nothing more than what the colonizer did. That's what they had to do to subjugate us. So then how do you take the spirit away from people? Right? How do you take their spirit of fight away, their spirit of life away? You have to put upon them another entity, another concept, another ideology they will then give up their power to. Right? And this is the Christianity, but this is the Christianity of the European, of the white colonial European, right? It's a specific type of manipulation of the Bible and of Jesus, right? As the concept of Jesus. Of course, if you read the Bible, right, he's a revolutionary. He was anti-imperialist, anti-state, and anti-oppression. But yet somehow that gets transmuted over time into an archetype of imperialism, oppression, and domination. Right. So this is when you digest your oppressor. That's why I talk about this so much. When you digest your oppressor, then you become the best embodiment of how to keep that oppression going. So then you pass it down to your bloodline because you thinking that's going to keep them safe some way, somehow. Right. But what happens over time and space, then all of a sudden the teachings, the preachings, the concepts get so deeply ingrained and embedded in your sense of self that you don't know yourself unless you are with others who are talking about that God. Right. So when you're talking about prayer, right? Prayer without action is just words. A prayer needs to have an action behind it in order for that prayer to come to life. That is the responsibility of those praying, right? But that's not what the Christian God tells us. The Christian God says you get on your hands and your knees, literally, and you just pray, and then you give it up to something else. What you are doing is you are giving your ashe to another entity that is then taking and manipulating that for its own end game. This is basic spiritual principles. Right? And Christianity operates through them, but they operate through them through a imperialistic lens. And so when you start breaking from that, right, this is the deconstruction moment. When you start breaking from that, what you are breaking from is giving up your spirit to something else. So when you call that energy, because what you're doing is calling your energy back, essentially, right? When you call your energy back, Hmm?
Through deconstruction?
Deconstruction. Because when you're deconstructing from saying that some other entity, some other institution, some other God has the ability to tell you, right, that well, it has the ability to tell you that who you are. So when you're calling that back, you're now taking responsibility for your life. You're taking responsibility back for your actual life. When you do that, you realize how much you gave away.
Yeah.
That hurts, right? And I think we have to understand, like, the deconstruction process hurts. You are going to, like I said before, you're going to break your own heart, right? You're going to break your heart because you understand that your heart was confined, so you are breaking it open.
Mm.
And when you break that heart open, you don't understand. People don't really, we don't know what love is, right? Because that's what love is. But we're taught a love that is very abusive. We're taught a love in which we must give up everything to something else. And if we don't give it up, then we don't get the love, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
abuse. So when you call that back because you're breaking your heart open, you are now breaking it open so you understand what love really is. Love's a fire. Love's a deep fire, a deep embedded energy within you that when you see something else happening, when you see like an injustice, when you see a genocide going on, right? There is no way you cannot have a reaction
Yeah.
because now your heart is open because now you know what love is, right? And
Yeah.
so when we're talking about prayer, prayer is really important, but prayer has to have an action, right? So now we're realizing we can pray for quote unquote peace or we can pray for Palestine, but that prayer needs to have something behind it. So like the boycott, people pushing back. You've got folks over, what I think it's in Seattle right now, Tacoma, no, Washington, where they're blocking the ports from being
Yeah.
able to leave, right? That's the prayer in action, right? That is actually going to kind of move that energy. But when you don't have the action, this is the crossroads. This is why when folks deconstruct and they go to different kind of traditions, when you lay that ebo down, when you lay that offering down, there's an expectation that you doing something as well to activate that alongside the primordial that you are laying it down for, because it's a reciprocal relationship. So when you also break from the church, right? When you break from that deconstruction, or you deconstructing, so you're breaking, you're realizing how unreciprocal your relationship with that institution was, right? So then there's also going to be anger.
There's so
There's,
much anger.
there's so much anger, right? And I'm telling you, Donnell, and everybody else, you have got to work with that anger. Because what the anger is letting you know is that you have every right to be mad, right? You have every right to be mad. You have every right to have your voice spoken because you have every right to take up space, right? But you can't take up space until you've been in your body and taken up space in your own vessel.
Yeah, I was just gonna talk about the body and how like um, we get kind of conditioned to pacify those feelings and pacify the body. Like I feel it. Like you can't watch what is happening and not feel something and not feel moved or not, you know. So even, like I feel like people are there are a lot of people who feel it, but they're in institutions or in spaces that tells them that that feeling is like some sort of resistance or somehow negative or innately bad because it's coming from the body because the body is bad according to the tradition. Um, and I think
Because the
the
body's not yours. Your body's not yours in the tradition, though,
yeah.
too. Right? That's the thing. We have to realize dehumanization. I didn't mean to cut you off, Danielle, but you made a really good point, right? Because the body is not yours in these institutions, it's somebody else's. So it's that God, but really it's not even the God, it's the pastor, right? It's whoever is it's a power structure of that church that
Mm.
needs your body for its purpose, right? If there was no service given in many of these churches, they would crumble. They would crumble. If women weren't in there, if youth weren't in there, if queer folks weren't in there, right, it would crumble because that's all those that trifecta are the ones who give the service. They give their body up, right?
Yeah.
So when you're used to giving your body up, that's how you learn how to dehumanize yourself because then you shut your body down. How many times did you go to church when you were dead tired, but you were like, no, I gotta go, I gotta give service. I gotta be there. I gotta be with community, right? How many times did you go and you were uncomfortable or you just were having a bad day, you had an emotion, but you couldn't express it in a space that's supposed to be your community because that's not what the space is for, right? So all of a sudden you constantly learn that you don't really matter. It has to be second to the institution.
Mhm.
And that's how we get abused in other spaces too, right? So when you go to work, right, and people are coming at you, or you're having things that are done to you that are not right, or you are literally being abused by your coworkers or your boss, you then also eat that, because we're also told what to mind our business, to this, you can't go ahead and you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So it's a way. So again, you should be angry, y'all. And somebody said that rage is violent. I actually push back against that a bit, only because there is going to be a rage within you when you really start to see how much you've been manipulated. It's anger, but it is rage, right? And the rage has to be engaged with. You have got to talk to your rage, because it's so rageful because it's been suppressed, not only in your lifetime, but especially if you are Black or Indigenous, for generations. So what you are feeling is your ancestral rage, which they're asking us to transmute into a righteous justice that will help us understand how to work with our anger to figure out strategies to push back against the oppression, right? So I don't want people to, so when we talk about indigeneity and this idea of love and peace, don't use that and define that through a white lens, because love and peace can only come when you've accepted your reality and actually operate from there. Not sitting here thinking, again, it's just going to come, right, one day if we just buy into love and peace.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I and speaking of just institutions and stuff like that, I think the paradigm shift for me, that's kind of feeding into that rage, and feeding into the kind of these big feelings that I'm having, and um, is that I feel like I came to a kind of a all of a sudden awareness of how much indoctrination I had internalized from the state, because it's like I thought that the religious indoctrination was like the big thing, and it was hard, and it was like I still say it's the hardest thing that I've had to do. But I received more indoctrination about America than anything else in my life, including the church, including Jesus and God, because I received indoctrination around America from the church. I received indoctrination around America from school, from
Yes.
society, from the media.
Yes.
Um, and there's this kind of this glamorization of what America is as an entity, and you know that his atrocities that it has committed historically, and you know of the violence that it has carried out against innocent civilians. You know of the millions of people that were killed, slaughtered because America decided to exist. Um, but I think that seeing in real time, like what we would have seen back then, except that we have phones now, we have social media. We're seeing the ethnic cleansing. We're seeing the calls for pushing these people and displacing these people from their land. Netanyahu secretly requested, this didn't get covered by the media, but Netanyahu asked Egypt to open its borders to let in thousands of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. So this is not so there's no delusion anymore around what the desire is. This is about land. This is about power. Now they're bombing Lebanon and trying to draw them into the war because they've always fantasized about there being this greater Israel that expands beyond even the confines of what it has now. And that was the paradigm shift. It was seeing the media lie like blatantly. I feel like I've never kind of realized, not realized, but I've never really like seen it as much as I've seen it in real time, having the information and seeing what I'm seeing and hearing from the reporters on the ground in Gaza. Like, I'm being lied to in real time by the president, by the media. They're hiding things. They're not covering certain things. And so all of that contributed to this kind of deep rage and deep sadness and even sickness around everything that has been unfolding. Because we kind of internalize the myths of the state through all these places that we find ourselves in.
Yes. And I think that is what happens when realities collide,
Mhm.
right? And that's what we're seeing right now is we're seeing realities collide in ways that have not been able to because of the technology that we have. while at the same time the technology is being used and weaponized to keep us in these states of kind of discombobulation, because now we're being told that even the reporting that we're seeing on here is somehow propaganda, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we're
One-sided.
seeing,
Yeah.
yes, one-sided, right? But we're seeing again, this is what happens when the arrogance of power doesn't realize that it also is finite, right? And we have to remember, whiteness and white supremacy are very arrogant. They are very arrogant in terms of thinking that their site is the only one. That is, they slap on words like objectivity or history or the right to self-determine, right? They use these types of words and manipulations that somehow we should just fall in line. And because we are seeing a shift from kind of cable news, right? Because when you think about 9/11, this is actually very similar to what happened after 9/11 in terms of the media spin, in terms of American propaganda, and in terms of people pushing back then as well against that war that was coming, right? But we didn't have the same technological tools at our hand. So, right? So there was a way that there was a big manipulation of the media, huge manipulation of the media after 9/11, which led to massive Islamophobia, massive anti-Arab sentiment, right? That also impacted Black folks too. We don't talk about that. All of that stuff impacted in the beginning of higher state surveillance and higher abilities of people buying into state surveilling, right? So when you bring the state in and you give it permission to come in and start surveilling, it will always surveil the margins because that is who they see as the threat. Right. And so that's what happened in 9/11. So, but then we have is mostly cable media. So if we think about cable media, right, and the influence that had, because that was kind of new at the time, technology really went quickly, y'all. You have to remember this. So I'm 42. OK, technology is heavily moved quickly, much quicker than the actual social and political environment can handle. Right. Let's also remember that, too. So when early 2000s, we have cable media coming in, we have 24/7 coverage now, right? That was a newer thing. So people are able to literally sit there and listen to the news 24/7. What is the main thing people were listening to? Fox News, right? So you have Fox News coming out. That starts to really gain traction in the 2000s and 2010s. You also have other places like CNN and stuff, but like really Fox News becomes a very big kind of location many folks are getting their news from 24/7. So then when you got folks pushing back, there was massive anti-war sentiment. You had soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan literally saying they were lied to. They were who literally burned their medals, right? Who were like, this is nothing more than literally a genocide. They used the same words then, too, right? Then we saw Abu Ghraib, like some of the most horrendous human rights violations, right? We saw Guantanamo Bay, like the way that they use sexual violence, the way that they use brutality, the dehumanization, having them eat things that they knew they were not supposed to eat as Muslims. Like it was such an awful thing. And guess what happened? Obama wins the damn Nobel Peace Prize, right? Because representation became more important instead of actually looking at the structural violence. So now we're in a new era. So this is where the arrogance comes into the state. They have not caught up.
They have not.
Right? That's the thing. When you also keep your politicians stagnant and your government stagnant, it will always think that it can use the same tools and mechanisms to keep the population stagnant. Right? But that didn't happen. So not only did we have the lockdowns of 2020, right, which people then were able by themselves, if you were able to be at home, but even if you had to go out and be a so-called first responder, even though we shit it all over them afterwards too, right, there was still a way that it created space and time for people to reflect. And then the importance of media came out because that was a place that people found what entertainment. So things like TikTok and stuff became a location for folks to start to connect when we were literally put in lockdown. So people's perceptions and sight started to shift, right? And what that government did, because they're so arrogant, they didn't realize they also showed us that we have every capacity as a nation state to have people stay at home and still be taken care of, right? So now we have to go back to work. But now people are like, but I'm confused though. You told me for at least a year I could be at home and get paid, but now you're saying that we got to go back to work, even though you're also making the economy so that there's going to be more unemployment because the economy needs a pick-me-up, not the people, the economy, right? This is personahood of corporations that happened during what? Obama. Okay, Obama is a neoliberalist, and these neoliberalist policies implemented after Bush through him laid the foundation for the Trump administration's authoritarian nature to come through that Biden has not done anything to pull back on. We're just continuing on in the executive power branch, consolidating more power. But as they're consolidating more power, again, we have social media. So there's a way that we are at a crossroads. We see this astrologically, but when we talk about the astrology of this, right? This is the kind of an Aquarius energy that's going to be happening with Pluto, but we have got to be very careful because the collectives that we are forming must be informed and not just buying into the ideology put upon us. So right now we're seeing a cracking of the ways people are seeing the relationship to the state, just as you said, right? Because now people are realizing even if they try to use the same kind of ideology, the same type of site as before, there is no way you can't unsee exactly what is coming on the screen anymore. So now people's minds are breaking, right? Who do you believe? What you see or what you're told by somebody else? But if your whole life you've been told you can only trust what somebody else told you in one way, shape, or form, even what you see, you will still somehow justify in one way, shape, or form. So this is why, again, it's so important that we lean into the kind of body experience people are having right now, because your body is going to help you make sense of your new sight, because you now have a new sight. And people are now seeing differently, like you said. It's coming very quickly, too, because now time is collapsed. We're realizing that we don't even operate in the same time, right? We're not operating in the same time because now time is being manipulated in order to justify that continued brutality in Palestine, right? So now we're told that we have to start our time on October 7th and then go from there, or start your time 3,000 years ago, but you're going to completely miss over between the 3,000 years ago and October 7th. All that in between, we're told is to ignore. Right? So you can't do that because why? People are on here teaching, being like, well, guess what? 1947, 1948, shit, 1917, 1898, right? Now all of a sudden people, this happened actually, y'all. This started to crack when that Queen of England died. So when Lizzie kicked the box, okay? Like, let's be real. I love me some Ireland with that shit. When she kicked it, right, what happened? That opened up a new timeline. Because who was at the table now? The whole damn Diet Commonwealth, right? Everyone said, okay, now you dead. Give us our shit back. And in doing that, that started actually the conversation internationally on platforms like this and through other media outlets in which people were saying, no, the brutality of that empire is what is leading to the brutality that we're seeing right now. So we saw a lot of the Caribbean islands who said when the king and when the prince came, they said, y'all can go, but you can give us reparations back, right? Kenya told the prince, the king right now, like, you owe us an apology. Like, you literally put our people in concentration camps, right? But you want to come up here and walk around with your old white ass talking about, oh, well, you know, some things happen. No, the passive language, right, is used to pacify a population and take no responsibility. So that opening up of the queen dying opened up the conversation of history so that we understand that there's more than one history operating at the exact same time. So whose side and perspective are you using to understand the past? So when that cracked it open, now we're seeing a continuation, right? So now Palestine has been happening. We have seen these kind of constant reiterations in the public, even in the American public, but it was always framed through the lens of it's the Middle East, it's violent, it's because they're Muslim, right?
Can't understand what's going on.
You can't see what's going on, right? You need a PhD, even if you had a PhD, because I got one, y'all. Even you got a PhD, you're told you don't know enough because that's not directly your area. Even if it is your area, then you're called anti-Semitic when you push back against the state. So the floor will always move, right? So now that the floor is we know the floor will move, we're also moving the floor with us. That's the difference now. We're not just letting the state move it, we're pushing back and making it move over here. This is where the tension and crossroads is right now. But this is also where people are going to feel, because now when you realize you've been lied to your whole life and you bought into that lie, right? There is a way that sometimes shame and guilt come up.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You got to sit. I say this, y'all. You got to talk. That shame and guilt is just trying to help you understand that you are human. But shame and guilt is a mechanism of the state to keep you docile. Because that's one of the main things the church uses, shame and guilt. I grew up Catholic. Catholic guilt is a thing, right? You feel guilty for breathing, so you got to go pray, right? You feel guilty for having thoughts, you got to go pray. So guilt and shame become a place to keep you confined and to keep you buying into whatever you're in, so you don't cause waves. But now people are realizing, even if you buy into it, right? Your body is still a disruption, so you will always cause a wave when you're not wanted. But you're needed because your body's a commodity.
Like, I think that going back to your point about like the whose perspective that we're centering, like I'm thinking about how I just saw a quote from Dr. Naomi Klein talking about how, America gave Israel the mantle of whiteness and said that it is their turn. And now we have this kind of replication of what we've seen historically. And I think that what I've also realized is that how we've been taught history, because you brought up like people talking about, this started on October 7th. Every time we talk about what's going on in Palestine, everyone talks about October 7th exclusively. And of course, this erases so much history. It erases the history of the Nakba. It erases the rise of the Jewish Zionist movement, which has roots in American evangelicalism and, the restorationist movement. And I think that we get taught history in piecemeal, and we're not taught to connect history and see the connections and replications of history. Because when you look at the state of Israel, what is happening and the settler economy of Israel and how it got established, America got established in much of the same ways. And so a connection that we can make very clearly is that Indian Territory or Oklahoma is Gaza. These people who were indigenous to a land got displaced violently to a land through the Trail of Tears, had to go to a land that they were promised would be theirs. They would be untouched. And then years later, we have an Oklahoma land rush, people rushing to take over land that was supposed to be untouched, via these treaties. So it's like, it's the same, it's a replication of the same history. And the Holocaust and the history of the Jewish people is getting leveraged to justify what we're seeing unfold before us. So that's the angle that is like making people not make the connections, is that you don't want to seem like you're being dismissive of people who have been pushed out, who were pushed out of Europe and through the Holocaust and everything like that. But we kind of, that history is being leveraged to not make us make those historical connections that we're seeing between the state of Israel as a settler colony and America as a settler colony that displaced indigenous folks in this country and slaughtered them and, viciously and violently pretended that it was diplomacy. It's the same shit as, Israel fucking releasing letters saying, move, and it's like Israel is the only country that warns people before it bombs them. Like, are we paying attention to what is happening? There's this pretense of goodness and, oh, we're doing a good thing. We're telling the people to move to a different place. Meanwhile, people are getting bombed on the very roads that they're being told to relocate through. So there's this continuous this cycle of broken promises and false diplomacy and false relatability and this false goal of like coming to a quote unquote two-state solution. That has never been a goal for the Zionists. That's never been on the table for them. So there's been talk about it. And when there was talk about it, when it looked like it was becoming a reality, they killed the prime minister who came to an agreement with, I believe it's Arafat, about this, about a peaceful solution. And he was killed by a right-wing Zionist. And so like there's this constant illusion of we're doing the right thing. We're trying to act diplomatically. We are the voices of reason. We're the only democracy in the Middle East. All these kind of narratives around the myth that Israel tells about itself. It's a replication of the same myths that America tells about itself. The peace treaties were, the states idea of, oh, we're going to do things differently. We're not just going to come and take their land. We're going to negotiate with them. We're going to pay the money. We're going to do these different things. But it was never enough. The expansion, the goal was always expansion. The goal was always manifest destiny. The goal was always to expand as much as possible and to build an empire that would rival the empire that they left. So I think that because we're taught history in piecemeal, and we're taught history in like these little bits and pieces, especially if you're learning exclusively through the school system, you're not seeing the connections and seeing the replication of history. Because you can't condemn Christopher Columbus, and you can't stand up for indigenous rights in America and then turn around and say, but Israel deserves to exist over a land that belonged to a people.
Yes. And so this is the really important part. Everything you said is absolutely on point. And we have to realize something, right? We are living still in the European imagination, right? This is the European imagination because Europe itself, which is a peninsula of Asia, has only known violence in its own historical context. So that's what it exported. It exported that through its colonial projects, right? And when it did that, we are still living in their imagination. So then we are still living in the ways they are defining these terms, right? They're the ones defining goodness, democracy, freedom, liberty, right? But do we believe how they're defining it by their actions? Right? That's the thing. Do we believe how they are defining it? If this is democracy, if the US is a democracy, if Israel is a democracy that is defending its democratic values, then do we believe how they are defining democracy? This is democracy through a European Western lens. We are living in their violent imagination, which will always center them as somehow being and needing and justifying that violence for their democratic means, right? But when you push back on the idea of democracy, then people start to get really up in arms and say, well, what else? This is not a democracy, y'all, or this is a democracy through the European imagination. This is democracy through an American lens. That America said, in order for America to be democratic, it needs to have people that it subjugates, right? In order for France to have been the liberty and brotherhood, they had to come in and they tried to still subjugate Haiti. So as they were literally gaining their freedom and coming into Haiti with flags and banners, I have a TikTok on it, but I really am liking Julia S. Scott's book, The Common Wind, is another historical context of this, right? In the very beginning, he even has the story of French soldiers are coming in with banners that say liberty and brotherhood for all, and they had to change it out because the commander's like, yeah, we're not here though. So they changed it to this idea of peace. They said it's peace, and it's making the state, right? So we have to believe the definitions that the colonizer, that the power structure is using to define these terms, and then ask ourselves, is this true? Right? And if it's not, then we have to reject or refuse those definitions and terms, because history is consistently piecemeal, and we're really only taught European history, especially Western European history and a little bit of American, right? And it's done in a way to always justify some way, shape, or form its violence. So we learn about the power struggles, right? We have 18 million shows and TV series about the Tudors. How many goddamn things we learn about the damn Tudors, right? The man, Henry, done taken 8 wives, done killed half of them, and only had 1 kid left, right? Like we keep seeing the same things over and over again, right? We are fed certain narratives as a way for us to buy into the overall construction that the state is required for us to live, even though we're not living.
Yeah.
Right? This is not living, y'all. That's
the definition of peace. The definition of peace is acceptance of the status quo.
Exactly.
It's not rising. It's not revolting. It's not making too much noise. It's staying quiet and accepting your place as a cog in the machine of the capitalist empire.
And they can reinforce it by making Americans sick and ignorant. I've said this over and over again, right? But this is an actual tool of the state. So back in the early 1900s, right, there's a couple of things written about this. people in power said, well, if we don't give everybody universal health care, then over 2-3 generations later, Black folks will just die out, because they were so afraid of actually giving Black folks anything, right? After Black folks were used as literal commodities. And when I say used as commodities, y'all, I need you to understand something about the American plantation system, which is another reproduction of the colonial power. Britain took that plantation system and put it around the world. They started off in Ireland. They were brutal in Ireland. And when they figured out the best way to take land and to suppress people, they then moved that shit over to what we call the New World. And they weren't the only one. Every colonial power used the plantation system in one way, shape, or form as its economic base. We have to remember that. So we go into the U.S. South and that plantation economy down there, we have to understand something. Those enslaved folks ran that plantation. Not only just the land, the books, the carpentry, the firemen, like all of the, basically the economy itself was built by and sustained through Black bodies, right? But we are fed back this idea that somehow we are lazy, somehow we are just trying to take from the state. So that white supremacy, which is arrogant, right? In the early 1900s said, well, if we don't give universal health care, Black folks will die off in 2 generations. That doesn't make any damn sense. How are you going to try to kill off a people that have been here for over the most brutal conditions that your ancestors had to go through because they were the only ones who could actually heal you? So on the plantation, the 2-headed doctors, the conjurers, the hoodooists, the herbalists were the ones who, the midwives were the ones white folks went to because they were getting killed by their own damn doctors. Okay? So that arrogance then has them think that somehow if they take away from us, that somehow it'll somehow die off and they'll have this kind of pure race. That didn't happen. So then what happens after that? As we go through and we get so-called rights, then the state does what? Purposely starts to defund education, starts to defund the arts. I don't know how many of y'all remember, if you're older, right, the 90s, that whole Save the Music campaigns, right? They were actively taking away from particularly Black, brown, and low-income areas the ability to have any kind of social services. Then they cut healthcare. They cut mental health. Reaganomics literally took people and put them out in the fucking street. They are literally taking patients and throwing them on the street, right? So then what happens then? Epidemics of drug use happens. Right? So when you keep a population systemically sick and ignorant, while at the same time telling them that they must go through the institution to be successful, so while all that's going on, then what happens to us millennials? We are fed go to college. We are fed the only way you have success is by going through these institutions, right? And when you go through them, that is called Black excellence. All Black excellence is, y'all, is a new form of fucking talent and talent. And Du Bois said that he was full of shit too a few years after he made that concept, right? So now we got Black excellence, which what did it get us? What did Black excellence through education, especially college, gets us? It got us a lot of debt and now ability to pay for it. Right? I'm looking at them bills like, I don't know who paying that shit. I'm sure
can't. I don't know where
it ain't gonna happen, right? So then what happens when you then are beholden to the institutions now, because now you have gone through them, you are now successful. So now you have got that success in that degree, right? Mine's in the damn garage, I think, in the degree, but also in that debt. So now that debt is tying you to another institution because you can't now escape it. You got to pay off the debt, and you were told that was good debt. What the hell is good debt?
Yeah.
What the hell is good debt, right? Good debt means it's good for the state, not good for us. So you keep a population sick and ignorant. So when things are popping up, like 9/11, right? Well, then the state's got to take care of that because I got my own shit to worry about. And then when Palestine first started popping off, right? What did folks say? Well, I got my own shit here. Your shit here is related to that over there because it is because they are needing to consistently take more and more that they need us to be working to give up labor, to give up resources to go somewhere else. So even if you don't, quote unquote, care, you better care because we are funding literally on our backs a genocide while also internally people are literally dying because they don't have the ability to afford the basic ways to live. This is a plantation economy, y'all. This is the modern form of the plantation. And I think we have to really understand that to even understand what's going on in Congo. Right? It's all interconnected. And so if we don't allow ourselves to believe that this is how the West defines democracy, defines peace, defines success, right? then we will continuously reproduce a system that is oppressing us and calling that somehow progress.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about well, that's one of the things that we were going to talk about is the illusion of progress. This idea that we are, the things aren't as bad as they were, but you are tied to an institution that you can't leave because you can't leave. You can't pay for your insurance. If you leave that institution, you won't be able to, feed your family. You won't be able to, take care of yourself. If you pull yourself out of institutions, if you don't go through the institutional systems of, the educational institution, all these, you're going to be on the streets, and they keep these warnings out of like, you're going to be on the streets if you don't buy into what we are, buy into the system. The system will dispose of you.
Yes.
And so we're kind of kept on this hamster wheel of just keep running and keep going. We got to keep going. We got to pay the bills. And that alone, I've heard so many people say, like you mentioned earlier, I've heard so many people say like, yeah, this is, I'm sad about what's happening in Palestine, but I can't afford to pay my rent. Comments like that. It's like, and it's a valid comment. Like I understand where that person's coming from. And also, our silence is not going to save us. It's not going to change the fact that they will do to us. They have shown us that bodies are disposable. You can lay bodies at the altar of empire, and these are ritual sacrifices to the god of empire, to the god of colonialism, to the god of expansion, and all these different things. So yeah, that's why what's happening in the Congo impacts us. That's why what's happening in Sudan impacts us. It's because we are seeing in real time on our phones. We can go on our phones and we can see live. We can see people on the ground in Congo. We can look at the miners who are working in these dangerous conditions, having to crawl into holes without any safety. We're seeing the use of sexual assault and all of these through all these genocides as a weapon to keep people terrorized, to keep people subjugated. And we think we're arrogant enough to think that it won't happen to us because, we're America. And
It's in the past.
yeah, that thing, it's in the past. But we are also enslaved. We are also slave to an institution. We're slave to an insurance company. We're slave to the debt that we've accrued, trying to educate ourselves, trying to learn more about the system, and in turn realizing that the very institutions that we are now indebted to didn't teach us much about the system. They taught us pieces. They gave us the illusion of education. They made us, but they even took away our ability in these spaces to think critically about the information that's being presented to us. And if you criticize or if you present a narrative about American history or about the history that you're learning, that is that kind of counters what you're being taught in these institutions, you fail. So you kind of have to keep up the lie. You have to get the grade. You have to tell the lie. You have to continue to push the narrative that is fed to you by the state, and that in and of itself is enraging.
Yes, and go back to rage, right? This is why the rage has to come in. I'm not saying for it to consume people, but you have got to let it come up so that it starts to burn away a lot of that conditioning. Right? You got to burn it away because there needs to be more fertile ground, but you can't build on a raggedy ass foundation. You can't build on a foundation that you're still trying to piecemeal together, thinking you can hold on a couple of different things, right? And then put on top, it will collapse. But if you've not cracked that foundation, when those things collapse, it will get consumed by that foundation once again, which is what this state knows how to do. It knows how to consume you, right? In one way, shape, or form. So that rage has to come in as a way to burn away within you your attachments to systems that will continuously lie to you, but you have also been conditioned to believe the lie because to believe the truth is painful.
Yeah.
Because then you got to take action, right? So this is the thing. Action has to be taken, but what does that mean, right? And I think this is another thing where, because we're taught history through the European and through the colonial lens, right? Through the lens of those who have done the oppressing. There is a way that you have to realize to come back into your sense of self and to believe and crack that means you're not going to be able to move the same way you used to. things will change, which means your ability to be in spaces anymore. Like Donnell, you're saying right now, and I'm going to tell you with a lot of love, it's going to continue to feel enraging to be in there, right? There's a way your body starts to talk to you, and it's uncomfortable and it's fearful because your body is saying the only thing constant in life is change. So can you work with the energy of change? And it will bring chaos because you are not used to changing. But the human spirit is one that is malleable. We can change. But the only way you can change is to get into your body and believe it and realize it's not just going to be a fight, fight, fight. Some of this actually means you're going to have to figure out have a practice of rest, a practice of embodiment, a practice of connection to yourself, because there is no ability for us just to keep going. Exhaustion is another tool of suppression. This is why they are consistently bombing Palestine right now. They are purposely trying to exhaust them. They are purposely trying to dehydrate them. They are purposely trying to dehumanize them, thinking they're going to turn on one another so that they will also do the internal work of the state. They did the exact same thing to us. They did the exact same thing to Native populations. Andrew Jackson is one of the worst genocidal presidents out there because of his policies of what he did to Native populations that led to the Cherokee, led to the Trail of Tears. Right? There is a way they want us exhausted. So they keep you exhausted by telling you that you got to keep going to work. You got to keep, because you can't afford anything. So when you start to believe your body and that rage comes through, so you burn away some shit, y'all, what you are also having to do is then take responsibility for that burning away and ask yourself, what makes the most sense for me to move now? How can I move now? And who can I move with? So this is a lot of breaking of stuff, right? When you break conditioning, you then see how others are conditioned, right? You can see how people easily buy into these things, right? And so there is a way when you break that, you're also going to realize something else. And I wanted to say this. You're also going to realize you're probably disabled in one way, shape, or form. Because ableism is heavily embedded within the state. We don't realize how much these systems have been so violent to us over space and time that our bodies really cannot handle it. Wow. Right? So this is why disability advocates have been screaming at us for decades. Without disability advocates, we wouldn't even have the protections we do. The little we do have as workers. Right? Because think about this. Our people were on those plantations being brutalized. Our people were in those white folks' homes in the South afterwards being brutalized. We were up here in these factories in inhumane conditions. People were in Flint. When Obama brought his ignorant ass to Flint and put in those folks' faces, drinking water, saying, "You fine now," right? That is a way to keep you sick and also disabled. But then we're not allowed to actually sit in our bodies to allow ourselves the time and space to realize that maybe we can't do this because we have various abilities, right? This is why the idea of rest, yes, rest is so powerful. Trisha Hershey's worked in that ministry. She's from Chicago too. She's from Harvey. So she's as well. Her work is foundational, right? Because it is another way for us to understand that movement making is about coming back into ourselves and coming back into our rest, because that was what was stolen from us generationally. And we are seeing it being stolen from the Palestinians right now. We are seeing it being stolen from the Congolese right now, from the Sudanese right now. We are seeing it being stolen actually from the Hawaiians right now. That fire, right? And the response to that, they don't have no damn home. People, they have to take care of themselves. We're seeing it happen in Haiti right now, but Haiti's striking back again, right? Haiti's tell the GR, you can go fuck yourself. We're going to make our own shit then. And then what did the DR do? The DR came in and used intimidation. The DR thinks they're a white nation. Baby, y'all ain't white, just so y'all know. Y'all will just be as oppressed as other current big nations out there, right? But the DR, here they come with their intimidation tactics to try to exhaust. So when you realize that you can no longer do this, when you have really understood how much you have been conditioned and lied to, you cannot move the same way. That's what's also scary, because you're going to have to make decisions that actually center you and your body and not the comfortability of other people and institutions.
It's the built, like, I think the level of indoctrination and conditioning that so many of us have gone through makes a moment like this, especially if you haven't already been doing that work, especially if you like, if this is the moment that is like kind of disrupting your spiritual beliefs, your uh, indoctrination around the state. If this is the moment that is doing that, it is it is debilitating.
Yes.
I know a lot of people don't even know what to do. They don't know where to go from here. And all they do is, and all they're left with after years of trying to be loyal and trying to be faithful and trying to be givers and trying to show up and giving up their bodies, all they have left is all these emotions and all this anger and all this confusion about what to do next. They have to almost rebuild their lives up from the beginning, because when one lie falls, so many lies have to fall. It's a domino effect, and it literally ruins people's lives. It drives people to a breaking point. It breaks people. And I know that that's true for so many people, especially again if this is the moment that is causing your reckoning with your church. If you went to your church and you heard your pastor say, you know, we gonna pray for Israel, and this is biblical prophecy, and we not worried about them people over there because when Jesus come back, they was all gonna go to hell anyway because they don't believe in Jesus, and like
Yeah.
there's all these narratives, and you're sitting there, and it's like everything that you're seeing, everyone is lying to you. Everyone is holding up this narrative. Everyone is holding up the facade of the status quo and trying to do the system like we don't see on our phones in real time. Children, body parts being pulled from the rubble with their names written on their hands in hopes that someone will be able to identify them. Like this is not. Um,
It's not human, right? And I think that's the something that we're realizing, like there's no ability not to feel right now. Like I remember a couple of days ago, I saw something that I didn't think I could break more. And then I saw this man, Palestinian man, being told that his whole family was gone, right? And I thought about how much we have been taught to dehumanize men so much that we're not even realizing that men are also there being broken, right? To have to pull up slabs in order to find bodies, right? How can you call somebody an animal when they are literally out there day and night trying to like save people when there's also nothing? There's no water, there's no electricity. Like so there's a way that we're seeing how much we have been taught to look at other people through the lens of our oppressor, which will always oppress us. And I think that because we see so many parallels, that there's no ability to not almost feel like you want to throw up.
mm-hmm.
Right? And what I say to that, y'all, is you got to sit in that and you've got to fucking believe it. And when you believe that, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to say it over and over again, you will not be able to move the same way. You will not be able to be in the same company of people who can't even see it. You won't be able to not have moments of just a straight breakdown, right? How many of us been able to really sleep, right? I haven't been able to sleep really quite frankly, without taking something so that I can get some kind of rest. I also got a child, right? And then talking to my kid about this and my kid being like, well, what does this mean? Because I also had to talk to my kid 6 months ago about you can't go to Florida because you could be taken away, right? So it's the constant thing of our kids also being seen that there are places and spaces that they can't even be in either. So then what does it mean to have a society in which we don't allow children to be children? We don't allow people to actually live, right? We don't, and we are told that that is what is required for us to have our freedom, but yet we are not free because even if you speak out, you will be censored, right? There's censorship in the law, on the books now. Illinois is one of them. You can't be anti-Israel and boycott, right? So if we believe all of this, y'all, and we ask, what do we do? What we do is, as we are breaking, we also break shit. This is the reality. We are broken. We have been broken for a very long time, right? There is a way that, for me personally, from 2019 on, I didn't realize how much I could continuously break, right? When you start to realize and see things for what it is, and you start to deconstruct from not just religion, but from everything, from the American imperialist lens, right? When you break all of that down and you get to the core of your humanity, there is a way that when you are asking what to do, you got to break the things that tried to break you, which means that your ability to even be in institutions will not be the same. Where you live may have to move, right? Who you are with may have to shift. How you define things like family, y'all, has to be redefined. We have to redefine family. We got to redefine community, because I'll be honest with y'all, and I'll be honest with you, Donnell, there's a reason why I also can't necessarily be in social justice spaces, and I haven't been for a while, because there's a performance there as well of a morality. We got to let morality go and get down to humanity, because the morality we are fed is a performance of this ideal that no one can get to, because we refuse to actually acknowledge the fact that we are all broken, and that breaking has done things to us. We are traumatized. We have disabled bodies. We have disabled minds, right? We don't have the ability to actually tell other people that we truly love them without the fear that they will use and weaponize that for some way, shape, or form. If you can't even tell people in your family how you truly feel, is that family? Right? I think we have, all of this is having to break down. And when I say I'm speaking from experience, this is not an intellectual exercise, y'all.
Yeah.
It's not. I broke everything. I know what it feels like to feel like you have nothing. And when you have nothing but you don't realize what you have in you then. Right? We don't realize the power we actually have, because it's been suppressed. We've been told to stuff everything down. We've been told to make ourselves small. We've been told that it is better to give up of something else and someone else. And the more we give up to these spaces and places, the less they give back to us. They won't even give us fucking time off to grieve. We're still grieving COVID. Right? I listen to Levert sometimes. When Levert said that he had lost, I think, like 150 plus people, I was just like how do you hold that grief? We're not even allowed to grieve. So that we can't even grieve our own dead. And then we're seeing what's happening somewhere else, and we're realizing they're not even allowed to grieve their dead.
We can't even bury our dead
They
sometimes. We can't get off work. If you run out of sick days or run out of days, they're not letting you leave to go do some of these things, or to take a flight to go bury a loved one.
No, and then even who's considered family by institutions gets really narrow. So even if somebody dies and they're not a direct bloodline in terms of mother, father, then all of a sudden it's not even considered real family. So we're even told who our family is in order to be able to make space for it, right? When you cannot bury your dead, when you cannot give honor to them in one way, shape, or form to lay them to rest, there is no rest in the living. When we can't honor our dead, when we cannot respect what death does, when we cannot respect the lessons of death that is telling us that life is finite, that there is a limitation to what your body can do, because your body is a materiality of a vessel that needs certain things in order to survive, right? When we don't understand that death is a final kind of life cycle before you come to the ancestor realm, then there is no ability for us to respect life, including our own. That's why they're desecrating those bodies there. That's why they desecrated our ancestors' bodies here, using them for medical experimentation. Everything they did here, they're going to do there, y'all. And so do we believe the fact that these spaces are meant for us to learn how to dehumanize ourselves over generations? And when you stop that right now, generational trauma and breaking, people talk about all that, this is what it is. To break that trauma means you are allowing yourself to actually be human again. Right? And so we got to redefine things. So I ask folks, ask yourselves, people you are in relationships with, are those relationships one that are actually fulfilling in terms of everybody's full humanity, or are folks playing scripts? right? And when you start to ask those questions, they're really hard. The harder the question you ask yourself, the more you're actually telling yourself the truth. But when you don't want to ask yourself certain questions, you're afraid of actually seeking truth because you know that that truth is going to butt up against all those assumptions, all those lies that you built upon. And you're thinking, if I can just go ahead and keep doing it this way, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay, y'all. No one's going to save you. No one has ever saved us but ourselves. Our oppressor has never saved us. They never will. Why? We are the commodity.
And speaking of the us not being able to bury our dead or learn lessons from death or hold space for what death does and what it means. Um, it, that's kind of tied back into the state. The state doesn't respect death. The institutions that we work for don't respect death. Israel is bombing graveyards
Yes.
in Gaza. They're bombing graveyards in Gaza. So when we talk about these men who are having to, with flip flops and bare
Yes.
feet, walking on cracked glass for the hope of trying to see if their loved one made it, and not even able to retrieve their loved one from the rubble because they have no tools to do so. You know what I'm saying? I saw a father that lost wife and two children. All they were buried under the rubble. He couldn't get to them. He had some random tool like a hammer or just trying to use it as to try to move something out of the way. And he's calling their names and of course, they're not responding. And so there's this, death is just, and we are desensitized to the gravity of death and what it means to lose, what it means to kill. Like that's not a to wantonly be able to do that requires a level of sociopathy and just detachment that that is quite literally unimaginable. It comes from a lifelong series of indoctrination. I remember, being young. Speaking of definitions, I remember being young and hearing, so much about this term terrorism, hearing the word terrorism get thrown around a lot, and of course, this was in 2001. I was in second grade. I didn't, I had no concept of the gravity of what was unfolding. But now we're kind of seeing this replicated moment in history. And to your point earlier, you're seeing the state try to use the same tools to get people to generate consent for what is happening in Palestine, for the genocide that is unfolding, to make us be okay with it. I've seen propaganda videos of like people talking about Palestinians celebrating 9/11. I've seen there's so much propaganda, misinformation, disinformation out there that is allowing us to and there's so many narratives that exist that we can buy into anyone that we want and kind of detach ourselves from the reality, like we've always done. Um, and um, and when I think about me and I think about the people that I love and that I care about deeply, family, friends that are that are friends that are now family, just people that I carry with me in my heart, who I carry a piece of with me everywhere I go. um I think about 30 of them dying because for no reason, because they existed, because they dared to exist. And I know what that would make me willing to do. I know if we lean into humanity, if we're looking at a human, a father losing wife, children, cousins, loved ones, aunts, uncles, in one fell swoop because they dare to exist in a land that a people has been trying to displace them from for years. And the issue is they won't fucking leave. They're not going anywhere. They've committed themselves to staying on their land. It is an act of resistance for them to even be on their land. For them to exist on the Gaza Strip is an act of resistance, let alone them pushing back using force, which the UN grants people the right to do. Armed resistance to occupation is a right, is a human right, according to the UN, if I'm not mistaken. And so, but we've detached these people from their humanity. They have to sit there and let their families get bombed and not say anything. They can't respond. They can't do anything back. They're not allowed to They're not allowed to resist. Because we want peace. Hamas doesn't want peace. Hamas, and it's not about peace. Again, we're going back to this definition. People want liberation. They don't want peace. They don't want peace and continuation of the status quo. They don't want peace and continuation of occupation. They don't want peace and people continuing to displace them. Now we're seeing in the West Bank how Israeli settlers are taking advantage of this moment, of the chaos of this moment, and going into these places and killing civilians and kidnapping Palestinians, torturing them, taking their land from them, taking their houses from them. And this can happen at any moment. And this has been happening, of course, it's been happening, but now it's kind of being ramped up. But they want us to believe, they want the American people to buy into this notion that, oh, they don't want peace. They keep fighting back. They don't want peace. They're animals. They're barbaric. They're savage, using all the, the markers of colonialism to identify, that they use to identify and dehumanize and other people.
Yes.
And it's like we're being spoon-fed a narrative now. And it's like, remember, guys, Hamas is ISIS. Remember how you reacted to ISIS? You should react this way to Hamas. And we're being spoon-fed this narrative about a people who are under occupation. And again, I think that ties back into us not being able to connect the dots of history and see how, armed resistance against colonial oppression, that was the Haitian Revolution. That was, all these moments that was Nat Turner. That's what these moments were. These were people who were under suppression and under the occupation, who were being subjugated by the state, who decided that they did not want the status quo to continue.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I think this is really important, right? Because everything you just said, if you listen to what Donnell said, that's exactly what they did to our people here. That's the exact same thing. We were told that we were barbaric, that we needed to be not more docile, right? As we were living under apartheid as well. Like, if we listen to our elders talk about Jim Crow, if they were from the South, that was a violent system. That was a very violent system. To not be able to basically be told that if a white person comes around you, they have the right of way for everything. They could take up space in their space, in your space. They could come in. This is why our people had guns all the damn time in the rural areas, especially because the Klan was real. The Klan was the police along with the Klan itself, right? They marched on Washington in 1920. Like, they had political power for a very long time. Right? And we were told that if we resisted against that we were the problem. So now you got the exact same thing happening. What would you do if your whole life you grew up under an occupation? I need people to actually ask themselves that. What would you really do if your whole life you only knew an occupation? If you had to get permission to leave the bounded walls, and every time you did that, you were going through humiliation? What would you do if you were a child and you had grown-ass people who would literally use you as target practice? What would you do if you knew that your daughters and your wives and other children were going to also be sexually abused in one way, shape? That's not maybe if, it will happen in one way, shape, or form. Mm. When our mamas, our aunties, our people were in them folks' homes doing the work for them because they were forced to. Black women couldn't even be at home if they wanted to. We were put on books to have to work in certain places in the South. You were always under threat of sexual violence. Always. Always under threat of sexual violence. So what would you do? Right? What would y'all do? And I think that's what is the irritating point of me when people want to say it's not our problem, it's not a Black issue. Y'all need to stop listening to folks like Dr. fucking Umar. I'm sick of this shit too, quite frankly. Because that is a twisting of Black liberation in history to keep us limited in what we actually do, which is nothing more than Americanism. That is an American imperialist model that is being digested from folks who have suffered the most brutality under it here. We need to let that shit go. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, they are testing out what the world will allow.
Yes.
That is what is going on as well. They want that land, they want the resources, and they want the Palestinians gone. That is why they are bombing the grave sites and the landmarks. Because if you can eradicate the actual physicality of it, then you can really reshape history in your mind and on the books, because you are arrogant enough to think that. Hence why the censorship now here, they want to take videos. How many videos have folks say that are now been taken down for some issue, right? Community guidelines violations, the propaganda that folks you've been following, right? There's a constant rewriting of the past and the present to keep us in a different past in the present. Right? So when we realize that we are never allowed to be present in these projects, you are never allowed to be in the present in the colonial project. The way time is manipulated for us is that you got to be in a past, in their past, through their lens, and either some made up future that we're supposed to be hoping for. This is the whole kind of platform of the Democrats, has been for decades, quite frankly. Well, we're not as bad as them. There's no fucking policies. There's no policies. We're not as bad as them. And so they bank on a future, right? While the Republicans bank on a past. We are never allowed to be present. This is why your body matters so much. This is why you got to feel. This is why you've got to realize, right, that in this present moment, in the now, right in this time, it's 11:20, in this present moment, what is actually occurring and what do you see? Because that's going to shape the past that you look to and how you see that past and which past you go to. Because we've already gone through a bunch of pasts here. We brought up Haiti. We've got the European past. We've got the coloniality past. Now we're bringing different histories in this present moment that is getting us embodied in the realization that this has been nothing but a complete iteration of violence that has been fed to us as peace. So then what would you do, y'all? What would you do? And don't tell me that you would vote them out.
A lot of people would do nothing, but I think we're seeing that now.
Thank you. And that's the reality. You wouldn't do anything. So you got to have an honest conversation with yourself, right? The truth will burn through shit. There's a reason why I don't fit really well in institutions. Because the minute you bring in truth into a space that can't hold it, you are the problem. You are the problem when you bring the truth in.
Yep.
Right, a different truth that they want. And then so therefore you will be seen as, Patrice Cullors says, the terrorist. Right? So who's defining terrorist and who's being terrorized? Right, is really the question. Because the way that the slippage happens is that we are then told that if we push back, then we are also being an oppressor. That's the fucked up thing, right? So they're weaponizing a genocide that happened in Europe to justify the genocide that is occurring in Israel and telling us if we push back against what's happening in Israel, we are essentially doing what the Germans and the Russians did to the Jewish folks during the Holocaust. You know how fucked up that is?
Yeah.
And how disrespectful, again, to their ancestors. Like, I really do think about the ancestors who did not survive in those concentration camps, looking down and seeing the same shit happening, but in their name. Like, how do you, like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? This is why I'm also saying the ancestors are loud right now. They are knocking at the damn door saying, I need you to turn around and see us and understand that we were human too, and can you learn from us? We got to stop deifying the past as well. We got to stop deifying this idea of being human, because what's going on in Palestine right now is humanity. They are not superhuman. They are human, right? What we are seeing, you people's reactions now, this is not being superhuman. You are being human. The magic of the human is actually sitting in your humanity and knowing that you have every right to live, not be a walking dead, but to live. So are you living? Right? Is this life? And if it's not, then you have every right to remake it and take that shit back. That is you being human. That is you actually engaging in your power, in your ashe. And that is what the ancestors are trying to ask us to do. Can we turn around and look to them and understand what they actually went through? Learn from them, because some of this shit didn't work, y'all. We know respectability didn't work. We know representation didn't work, because we got representation real good now, right? You got a Black Indian woman and an Indian PM in Britain shaking hands in front of the 10 while they're also supporting a genocide, right? When you are in the master's house, the master will use you for his bidding. So then so what does it mean then to allow ourselves to learn from our own past? To ask deeper questions, and then to use that information in the present, right, as a way for us to strategize, because it's going to be more than one strategy. When people say, what do I do? First, you got to believe. And once you believe that shit and sit in your humanity, then that will give you better direction of what to do. But just to go to the what to do when you've not actually sit and embodied means that you are skipping the most necessary step that will connect you back to your power. Your power is in your humanity. It is not in the gun. That is why they dehumanized us first before they enacted that violence as well, as one part of the violence. The dehumanization had to occur as a way to keep our bodies in a state of docileness. Right? And that's why being human is so dangerous.
And I think all what you said is so true. And I think that I'm thinking about how like the state, one of the things that's leading to this kind of passivity from people who are I talked earlier about people who, who are the debilitation of deconstruction and how it's like it, can just unwind someone's entire life, especially when they realize, especially, God forbid, they're learning about these things, at 40, 50, when they've been, kind of going through indoctrination for all these years. I've learned that it's taken about just as much time for me to unlearn as it did for me to learn. And I realized in this moment after October 7th that I still have yet so much more to learn, and I still have so many more myths to deconstruct around what I've been taught to believe. But there's a way in which, especially in America, the state fattens you up. The state makes makes you comfortable. The state allows you to move around. You have this illusion of freedom, and you walk around, and you're free. You're not hearing the things that are happening. The people that are being impacted by U.S. foreign policy, because it's not impacting you. You're still be able to wake up. You wake up in your quiet neighborhood. You're able to, go to your job. You're able to go get in the past, go get your Starbucks and whatever it is, and go through your drive-through and be comfortable. And now we're in a place where we're sitting with discomfort in our bodies. And that discomfort is signaling so much to us. It's signaling something isn't right. It's signaling that that a shift is occurring. It's signaling that we're kind of breaking away from these things, and that is uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable for so many people. But white supremacy culture wants you to believe that you have a right to comfort, so you don't have to look. You can look away. You don't have to pay attention to what's going on because you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your family. And we kind of have internalized this kind of idea of we have a right to be comfortable. We have a right to, quote unquote, protect our mental health. But how can our mental health be stable knowing what is going on and knowing that we're doing nothing to stop it, that we're not even talking about it, that we're not even holding space for what is what is unfolding? And I think that's what's leading to people's the idea of a boycott fatigue is wild to me in this moment.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around this idea that the desire for comfort and the desire for the status quo is so strong that you're willing to, even if you are standing up against things, or you hold yourself to be standing up against these oppressive systems and speaking out about what's happening, that you can get tired of that. You can lose sight of that. You can, go back to this desire to kind of be comfortable and situate yourself in this place of comfort and, have these blinders on that many of us have had on for our entire lives. And I guess I want to ask, like, how do you recommend, what's the step of dealing with that discomfort? What do we do? How do we get to a place? Will we ever be able to get to a place of quote unquote comfortability, knowing what we know now and knowing and seeing what we have seen over this past month? I think yesterday was the month, was officially made a month since all this started to unfold.
So I'm glad you asked this question. Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question because I would say this. I think that when you get into your body, as you just said, Donnell, and you've done a great job of, honestly, I appreciate your vulnerability and just showing and speaking about this, because what you're actually realizing is that you've never been comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think we have to realize we've never been comfortable. You've been fed the illusion of comfort, right? So what is comfortable, y'all, about feeling beholden to an employer for your livelihood? What is comfortable about believing that you must work like a dog, literally, in order to have your basic needs met? The basic things we need for survival, not just like, the quote unquote luxury, like, no, food, shelter, and water, right? We've been fed the definition of comfort from our oppressor, which again is whiteness. So whiteness is ideas of this move to comfort, right? But again, it's through their eyes, right? We are not comfortable. We have been fed comfort. What is comfortable, quite frankly, when I drive my kid to school in the morning, right, trying to go over to Blue Island, and off of Cicero, there's always a backup trying to go into Dunkin' Donuts, right? Like onto the street, onto the actual street. So you got lanes can't move, right? That is not actually giving you any more time, y'all. Y'all sitting your ass in a car waiting to get some coffee that you hope will be warm or hot when you get there, right? And a donut that's not going to be dry, right? And so, but the thing is, you're told that it's comfortable and convenient because what you're in your car that you maybe can or cannot afford, because gas keeps going up. And if that car breaks down, can you actually afford to get the car fixed, right? We are fed comfort in a way that is meant to actually keep us docile and to keep us confined within a system, right? That needs our kind of production. So I say this, what does comfort actually mean then to you? Not what you've been fed, but what actually is comfort, right? And once we realize that we have to redefine what comfort is, we're going to see how we've never been comfortable. So that's going to help you decide then, how do you then move and who do you move with to gain some kind of comfortability? Because life is not necessarily supposed to always be hard. There's supposed to be duality in everything, right? But we're fed this idea of feast and famine. So if everything is not love and light or is not good, right, then all of a sudden everything is bad. No, there's going to be an ebb and flow. But we're so uncomfortable allowing ourselves to sit in discomfort. This is why we disassociated so much, right? Disassociation is taught to us, mind over body. They even co-opted spiritual practices of mindfulness and put them into corporate so that you get your mind right so that you can go back to work. They fed us and redefined, right, the feudalism. We're living in feudalism, y'all. Let's be real. So now back in the 60s, it was men who were, in the office, and that was the new culture. Now that we opened it up, representation, right? What did they do to us millennials, especially in 2010s? They made the workplace supposed to be fun. So now you can go to work and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. You can take a nap there. You can play ping pong there. Yeah, because they want to keep your ass there. You're not comfortable. You're exhausted. But you are fed these kind of illusions to keep you disassociated. So you get fed with liquor. Look at WeWork. WeWork just collapsed. That shit is a hot mess. The U.S. is also nothing but an MLM. Okay, it's nothing but a big ass MLM that gets people to overvalue things that are just the same old thing. All WeWork was co-oping space and co-sharing space with liquor. Right? So you are fed this illusion of comfort. And then what happened when we were able to go back in the home in one way, shape, or form? You're realizing that you were never comfortable in them spaces. That's why people now are saying, I don't want to do shit after work. Why I got to make 3 different jobs? So again, you're not comfortable. You're working. Or you're realizing, I don't like you. I don't want to be in community. Like, I don't want to have to, you know what I mean? And I think that's the other thing too. We're not comfortable because we also won't admit when we don't actually truly connect with somebody else. But we're supposed to have this idea of niceness and goodness. All niceness does is keep you actually very uncomfortable, right? So then what does comfort really mean? Who would you want to be comfortable with? And how would that actually look in real time, right? This is about redefining. But you can't answer those questions until you actually know what you need. What are your needs? So the next question is, what are your actual needs? What are your needs? What would bring you pleasure? I ask this all the time. I know Adrienne Marie Brown's got the pleasure activism book, right? And Trisha's work, Sonia Renee Taylor's work on the body. These are really important kind of functions and tools we have to engage in order to really figure out what does it actually mean to be in community with other people by being in community with yourself. And you can't do that until you actually know what your needs are. So, right, you have to know your needs, your wants, and your pleasure in order to figure out who the hell you are and who you can be with. So when you deconstruct from the idea of comfort fed to you, and actually go into your body and ask yourself, am I really comfortable right now? Or am I a cog in the machine who feels complacent and needs to keep doing this, right? And I don't care if you got a family and both y'all making all this money and stuff, you are still beholden to that job because you got that house note. Right? You got that car note. All of this kind of performance and materiality that folks are realizing is bullshit, right? Is nothing but a performance. Half these influencers on here are on credit card debt and literally are living paycheck to paycheck or brand deal to brand deal while also performing capitalism for us. They're not comfortable either. Right? So I think this is the crux. This is part of the breaking. And this is where it gets really uncomfortable because you now have to sit and acknowledge your discomfort that you were pushing away for years, for decades sometimes, right? And if we look at some of our elders, like I'll take my mom for an example, like she worked her whole life, and I'll be quite frank, she's miserable. We can't talk anymore. She's absolutely miserable because she did not allow her body to lead. Her body broke her down as a trauma burn ICU nurse at County for 30 years. Right? So now she's by herself. And how many of our elders and parents are like this, you know, if you're being honest, where they are so uncomfortable, but they're angry. They're angry and bitter. And I get it. I actually understand it, right? I get it. But at the same time, it's because they are realizing that they bought into a lie. They did all this work. And when they hit a certain time, they were going to be living in, no, they have no ability to understand how to live because if all you've done your whole life is work and then you actually have your time back, you don't know what to do with that time. So you get angry about it because now you got to focus on you. Now you got to ask yourself, what do you actually want? Now you got to ask yourself, what do you like? You don't even know what you like because you've been working for 30 fucking years of your whole life and you told your kids to do the same thing. So you have no relationship with them either because you never ever talked to your kids. You didn't see them as another human being. You saw something to discipline by or to discipline on top of them. So now you did the American dream that has left you literally sick and depressed and by yourself. Right? Do we learn from our elders as well? Right? And I think sometimes we're realizing, again, this is why I asked the question, what is family then really? Because sometimes we have to realize that not everybody wants to come along because they don't know how to or don't want to, or it's too scary. Mm-hmm. But you cannot stop you coming into your humanity because somebody else refuses to get into it. So then what does family mean? Who is family? And then who is community? You can't answer that until you actually ask yourself, what are your actual needs? What do you need? What does your humanity need? Right? I had to do this myself. Again, this is not theoretical, y'all. I'm a praxis-based scholar. This shit, when I say I have broken, and I continue to break. It's a lifelong process. It's not just that you get it one day, right? No, you're continuously cracking things that have been long-standing. Because if you remember something, this is for generations. We are trying to make space for those who are coming after us. I don't care if you have kids or not. You ain't got to have your own kids. There are other people coming after us. We got to make the space, right? We got to make the space. Not everybody makes it to the promised land. That is an actual parable that we need to listen to a bit, right? Moses has one job, free motherfuckers. He couldn't go to the promised land, right? Moses had to go over here because his job was to break open some things, right? For other people behind. This is a generation. This is why our ancestors are saying, can y'all turn around and see us? We are your past, but there is a future. And right now in the present, we are the ones that get to remake that future for ourselves and for others, but it's going to hurt, y'all. We're not going to get it right. It's not about being perfect. It's about being human. So I had to ask myself, what are my needs? And I'm realizing right now, like, yeah, I'm looking for a community, but I'm also very clear that it's not just anybody. I just can't be with anybody because I got to be able to take up space as well and not feel like I got to be of service. So it's a lot of breaking of things, right? I broke community. I broke with family because I realized family sometimes ain't your blood. And that's hard.
It's very hard.
Right? But I can't be with anybody because that's what keeps us docile in the systems. We got to know what our needs are so that we can be with other people who can be with needs together. We are selves, not individuals, with other selves to make collectives, right? We need collectives. And collectives is not just other people. What's your connection with the land, right? What's your connection with other forms of life? So there's a way, even as people have left my life, ancestors have come more front and center, but so is the land. I do honor my land, the land, excuse me. I do give offerings to the trees as much as I give offerings to the ancestors and primordials, right? Because it's all connected. If we have no connection to the ground, we have no connection to our ancestors, because our ancestors are buried in the ground. It gets that simple, right? But then again, we are told to disconnect. Black folks are told we don't do nature. Who told us that? Right? Who told us that? And who told us you need to have $800 worth of gear to go into nature? Right? We've been fed back our own practices that they don't even get right. This is why I love the work of Leah Penham at Soulfire Farm. She's got a new book that we're reading in my Patreon, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Black Earth Wisdom, Soulful Conversations with Black Environmentalists. Ooh. It's a beautiful, but just came out, beautiful book. Again, if you're interested, I'm doing it on my Patreon, but read it yourself, okay? Read it yourself, y'all. She, her and her sister, I believe, run the Soulfire Farm up in upstate New York that works with BIPOC folks to get us back connecting with the land, right? And there's a way that what your needs are. You need food, shelter, and water, y'all. That's a basics. So what's your relationship to the water? What's your relationship to the land? What's your relationship to food, right? And can we build them in different ways? Because there's different ways to have those relationships. So I know that's a long answer to that question, but the change, it's a really good question about change, right? And comfortability, excuse me. And I think we have to redefine it.
Black Earth Wisdom by Leah.
Leah Penniman, Penniman. And she's got another book as well. I've got, it's called Farming While Black as well. That's her first, but this is the second book she has. But again, we have templates. But they're not just humans either. The land has been telling us what resistance looked like, right? Every time they try to come in and dominate the land, what does the land usually do? Strike that shit right back. When they try to come up to the water has been fighting back. The animals have been fighting back because no life, no spirit of living is meant to be subjugated and dominated. That is not the purpose of life. But that is the purpose of life for the colonial project.
And I feel like that's what makes, just speaking of hope, and I feel like that's what makes hope so difficult right now. But just using your Moses analogy about like, it may not be about getting to the promised land. It may be just about helping folks get free, so that can be eventually a thing that that does happen. And yeah, it's very easy in this moment to feel, and I think I want to wrap with this because I have to. Wish we could stay for a few more hours, but I got to go back to the Neo plantation. So
I understand.
I understand. But I think I guess I want to think about and unpack how we're defining hope. Yeah. Is hope even a word that we lean into? What is the I guess the conflict or the kind of the conflict between hope and knowing.
Yeah.
Do we hope that things can change and hope that things will change, or do we kind of walk in knowing that they will and think about it and think about our actions, the things that we do today, as setting up for that knowing that comes later on? Where's all of that landing for you? Where's hope for you? And is hope fraught?
Yeah. So this is funny because I'm actually writing about writing against this actually in my book right now. I don't believe in hope anymore because I think it keeps us in the future sense, right? It's a very progressive neoliberal. For me, I believe that the knowing brings I believe in possibilities. I believe in dreaming. Right. I actually think possibility making and dreaming are the mechanisms that we need to lean more into versus hope, because possibilities and dreaming require to dream. You have to do what? Sleep. And if you sleep, there is a repair that happens. And in that repairing, in the dreamscapes, that is when we can start to freedom make and take those dreams and bring them into reality. That's the possibilities. So what is impossible to you right now, that can become possible once you actually take the idea and either speak it, write it, or create it. So for me, so that's why I don't believe in hope, but I do believe in dreams. And that's why I think right now in this moment, art is important, music is important, the creativity is important, because it is through our dreams being made and articulated from artists and from revolutionary thought, right? Revolutionary action, revolutionary, by revolutionary, I mean being able to express yourself through different means, right? That to me is what we are, for me is what I believe is what's going to help us in going forward. It's coming back into our humanity through creativity. So it's not hope, it's dreaming.
Mm. Wow.
But I'm writing about that now. So hopefully I'll get a manuscript out by next year. But that's what I'm trying to write on is planting seeds of abolition in streams. So how do we dream and how do we plant the seeds of the dreams that we can then, that will be watered as we, because trees, forests take a long time to grow. They take hundreds of years, right, to kind of come to life. So what are we planting now that can start to continuously bloom and come to life from those who are coming after us, because we know those who came before us are still with us. So again, this is past and present colliding in the now to dream.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm glad that you're tackling this, that you're writing about it as an offering to the world. For those who don't know, if you are, I've been reading the comments, I've been following the comments. Follow and support Dr. Truesdell's work. Go to the link on her profile in her bio. She has a Patreon. She has resources that are available for free through her Guerrilla Resource Library for us to learn, because we have to, education is so essential in this moment. We can't just attach ourselves to ideas without knowing what we're fighting for or what we're resisting for. And without knowing how the state has functioned historically, because as we see now, it's a replication of the same history. This is not new. What is being done, what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in the Congo, is not new. It's a replication of history that we, have been conditioned to allow to continue to happen because we've been kind of fed a narrative about who this nation is and about what it stands for, and even our spirituality as well, through many of our upbringings in conservative evangelical spaces that are beholden to white supremacist ideas of spirituality. So follow Dr. Truesdell's, the link is in her bio. And thank you again for sharing. I've been enriched by what you've shared, and as always, and I'm just really grateful for your presence and your voice, and especially now.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you, Donnell, as well. And also follow Donnell's work. And I just want to say this to you, Donnell, the way that you model vulnerability in the public is actually very important. So I want to thank you for that, because we have to allow ourselves to bring our full humanity into the spaces. And so even when you go to work and other folks go to work, don't be afraid to bring your humanity in, because it won't go away anymore. So allow it to speak to you so you can figure out what makes sense for you going forward.
Thank you. I'll definitely keep that in my heart and in mind. I appreciate that.
Yeah, much love to you, seriously. And then for folks that are asking, the live is taped, so I'll have a copy of this on my YouTube for folks to look at later. And Donnell, I'm sure you'll have it as well on your YouTube. So follow us both on YouTube, and the full video will be available on both of our channels sometime soon.
Yes, and I'll let y'all know when that'll happen, or when that happens. I'll probably make a video about it, or talking about the live, or sharing clips from the live, so y'all know, what we talked about, and where to find the full video. So, thank you all for showing up. Hope y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see y'all again soon.
Yeah, see y'all. I'll see you, Donnell.